Hey, this is Tim Bilecki. I'm the managing partner of the law firm of Bilecki & DePond out in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'm joined by Michael Waddington, a fellow court martial defense attorney out in Miami, Florida. What I want to talk about today is a dramatic increase in BS experts from the government. These are oftentimes psychologists or psychiatrists or toxicologists or what is known as counterintuitive experts who are brought in by the government and taxpayer dollars are utilized. They're paying these experts sometimes $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 to come in and testify against your client. And if you look at the testimony, it's absurd, Mike. If you see this testimony, you don't have to be a practitioner or a lawyer, but no matter what, your client's wrong. That's the way it is, right? And so an example of these counterintuitive experts, I know you've seen them, you've dealt with them. For example, if there's an immediate report, then that is consistent with a sexual assault. If an alleged victim or complaining witness makes an immediate report, they'll testify that that is consistent with a sexual assault. If there's a delayed report, if they wait a week, if they wait 3 weeks, if they wait 4 weeks or a month, then that will also be consistent with a sexual assault. These experts make a lot of money to read the facts of the case. They never interview the alleged victim. They never interview any witnesses. They're what are called cold experts. They look at the facts of the case, and only specific facts. They don't do any actual interviewing, and they will formulate their testimony and shape it so that no matter what the government's facts are, they are consistent with a sexual assault. And then they'll tell this to a jury, and that oftentimes if they don't go through the crucible of cross-examination with an expert with an attorney who knows how to cross-examine this expert, a jury's going to say, wow, this is a psychologist, this is a psychiatrist. They're telling me this alleged victim's actions are consistent with sexual assault. It must be sexual assault.
Tim, I really love taking these experts out and embarrassing them in front of the jury. If they're calling a counterintuitive expert and paying the person $30,000, their case generally sucks. Okay, that's my opinion. It doesn't mean they won't convict you because you have to know how to cross-examine them. But when they call a witness, an expert, a doctor, psychologist or psychiatrist to testify that the victim's behavior was counterintuitive, you have to think about what that word means. Someone's behavior is counterintuitive. That means it makes no sense. So if some person attacks you on the street corner when you leave the office tonight, and then the next day, and you're brutally beaten and traumatized and you have PTSD, if you see the guy the next day and you walk up to him and invite him back to your house to have sex, that would be counterintuitive behavior, right? It would make no sense if your story's true. And so what ends up happening is they use these experts when, let's say you have an alleged victim who hooks up with someone and later on throws out an allegation of sexual assault, but that person continues to date or have sex with or have contact with the alleged perpetrator, and then eventually the relationship falls apart. The government can't explain why this person was brutally raped and sodomized and choked and was so scared, why she would be inviting that same rapist over to watch Netflix and chill every day for the next 3 months. And it makes no sense. So the key is to just lay out all the facts as they are in the case with these experts, point out that that expert didn't even take the time. He or she's testifying, trying to get your client labeled as a federal felon, a sex offender, and they didn't even have the courtesy or the decency or take the time to interview the victim, to even look to see if this alleged victim that they're supporting is a known liar, has a history of lying, or it's a completely bogus allegation. Because they don't want to know. Because if they know and they take the stand, and you're a doctor, you're held to standards as a psychologist or a doctor, and you take the stand and you try to put a dude in jail, they turn a blind eye so they don't get into trouble with their credentialing, and they can take the money and feel good about it. And those people make often more than the hired criminal defense lawyers. And they do nothing but sit there in court, reading, looking on Facebook or messing around on their cell phone, and then they get up on the stand and they spill out their typical nonsense, that's junk science, and then they go out and drink afterwards and go out to a nice expensive dinner and go on to their next case. It's a joke.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Mike. This is junk science is what this is. And what I always do in these types of cases is I challenge the expert. We've had a lot of success challenging the expert. Do a Daubert hearing. Make the expert testify, challenge what the expert's testimony is going to be. Do it in a 39A session outside the presence of the members. And oftentimes what we're seeing is that judges are limiting this testimony dramatically. And the government doesn't know what to do because oftentimes lawyers aren't challenging the validity of these experts. That on top of this just junk science, because the example you gave is something that I've seen time and time again. And we actually have a case like this now out of Japan where our client hooked up with someone on a TDY. They had sex. The alleged victim was married at the time. The very next morning, she invites him over for a back rub, and he comes over, gives her a back rub. They have sex again. They go out and have lunch that morning. They have dinner together. They continue having sex the entire time on TDY. Once they come off TDY and the alleged victim's husband finds out, when rumors are flying all over the place that these two were hooking up, it becomes a sexual assault. My client's actually been charged with that at a general court martial. And now they may try to bring in a counterintuitive expert to come in and say, well, to try to explain why she kept having sex with my client for days, the entire TDY that they were on, which is asinine. So going to the point where when these experts come on board, oftentimes their case sucks and they need to get something to shore up their case.
Tim, I don't like to challenge the experts in those types of cases, and I'll tell you why. And this is a strategic call. Usually if they're calling the person, then they have a really bad alleged victim with a terrible story. And these witnesses, for me, they're pretty easy to impeach because I've been doing this a lot. And the bottom line is you put them up there and you have them say all the things that are consistent that this alleged victim did. She called him back. They watched Netflix and chilled. She continued to have sex with him. She sent him gifts. She asked him to leave his wife to marry her. These people look you in the eye. They look the jury and they're like, those are all consistent with someone that's a victim of sexual assault. And then we go up there and I use the same things that they say are consistent and say, that's also consistent with someone who's a jilted lover. It's consistent with someone who's cheating on their husband and got caught. It's consistent with someone, especially when their story changes. That's the other thing. Oh, the story changed 5 times. That's consistent with someone who's raped. Well, it's more likely that that's consistent with a liar, with a terrible liar that keeps making up different stories. Isn't it, doctor? And you're getting objection, calls for... Often the judge would be like, no, that's a fair question. Hypothetically, someone that does that, changes their story, this is common sense, multiple times, is not telling the truth. And so it's a great way to bloody up the government's case. That's usually their last expert, and then have that person walk off the stand and they sit in the gallery staring you down because you made them look like an idiot. That's what I like to do. I like to impeach those experts and then embrace them and be like, their own doctor said that this is consistent with a liar, and we all know she's a liar. Why are we even here? So they're a lot of fun to cross-examine, and don't be scared of them. The problem, Tim, that you and I have talked about this is if the lawyer doesn't know what they're doing, say they've only done 1 or 2 trials or even 10 trials, and they haven't cross-examined dozens of these people, of these experts, they can be intimidating. Some of these people are PhD professors, doctors, medical doctors, some of them from leading universities. And they will come in and they're scary. A lot of times they're better educated than the lawyers. They're 65 years old, been practicing for many, many years, and they're very well polished and sophisticated. So you have to be able to take them apart piece by piece and know the science, the bullshit science behind what they're saying, or the lack of science, I should say.
Yeah, that's key, Mike, because I find that oftentimes lawyers, whether they're military counsel or not, are very intimidated by these experts because we joke around when we talk about how we can easily dismantle and take them out. Well, it's not that easy to do if you haven't been doing this for a while and are skilled at it, because every time you try to go after them, they may try to rebut it. So you have to have a very tactical cross-examination. And what we make look easy in court can fall very flat if you don't know what the hell you're doing, because these people, again, they have PhDs. Oftentimes, again, they're from leading universities. They make a living. They testify for a living. There's one in particular out here that does the Pacific Circuit where he just makes a living testifying. That's all he does. Fly around, read the file, and do cold testimony. It's the same testimony over and over and over. And we pulled his transcripts and cross-examined him on that. But to the uninitiated, it can be very, very intimidating. So what we like to do, and again, it's a strategic approach. I like to attack him first in the Dow Bear and hit him pretty hard. And that softens them up, because then when they know I know what the hell I'm doing, I'm going to come after them. Oftentimes that lowers that brings them back to earth a little bit on the government side. And then so the way they testify for the government ratchets down a little bit. Then I ratchet up and just come in and just absolutely destroy whatever came in.
Here's another interesting fact that I learned recently, and I should have thought of this, but you know, these forensic psychologists and psychiatrists, they go to your website. They go to my website, and they'll make snide comments to me about, you know, a book that I was involved in, or a case that I have, or some of them have gone through every single case result and every one of your case results. And so they know if you know what the hell you're doing or you don't. And they know if you have an ADC or TDS lawyer that's fairly new, they could be a good lawyer, but if they're fairly new at the job, then they know they can push that person. They can push the envelope in terms of talking about what science shows and what it doesn't show. Because if they know that your lawyer can kick their ass potentially, and they don't know if you have the studies ready to go, they'll throw study names out there. But what you can do is impeach them with the actual study. For example, they might give a study of what happens when someone sees someone that they're afraid of. And you're like, doctor, was that done on humans? Or was that done, my understanding of that study, that was done on laboratory rats back in the 1970s. And they're like, well, I can't test humans, actually. And I had one recently where this doctor got up there and said, well, it's typical for someone to stay in an abusive relationship. And I said, well, doctor, please enlighten us. What study on humans was conducted that shows that someone stays in an abusive relationship? She goes, well, we can't test humans. I'm like, was it done on something similar? She goes, well, it's a study that was done on dogs. The dog was put in a cage, and then they shocked the dog, and then they fed the dog, and then they took the lid off the cage, and the dog didn't run away because the dog had food. Therefore, based on that nonsense, that supports this fact pattern in this case. That makes no sense. Tim, here's another one. It's called tonic immobility. It's this idea that when an animal encounters something that's scary, it just freezes and basically looks like it's dead. And that has been studied and tested in very low, non-advanced species like sharks, some snakes, chickens, things like that, and where the animal could potentially freeze. And so experts now are flying around getting paid $30,000, $40,000 to talk about tonic immobility. That's why the woman did not get up and leave the bar when the guy says, hey, you want to go home with me? She had to stay with him because she was suffering from tonic immobility. There is no study, you can look it up, there's no study where that's ever been done on a human. And what you have to do is challenge them, because they will look the jury in the eye and talk about how tonic immobility is a thing. It's not a thing. Go to Wikipedia right now. I know that's not the psychiatric source, but they'll give you all the sources there just quickly. And you'll see tonic immobility, all the studies done on it have to do with like very, very, lesser species in a sense, and that the brain isn't fully developed. And there's no evidence out there, scientific evidence, that shows that a human will do that, especially in the fact patterns that we see, where I had a doctor recently say, well, the woman didn't leave. She just stayed there and had sex with the Navy SEAL because of tonic immobility. Like, what? They met on Tinder, they had sex, and then they hung out, and then he basically kicked her out. And what does that have to do with tonic immobility? She didn't freeze. She was like performing oral sex on the guy. So just challenge these folks, because a lot of what they say is bogus.
And the extraordinary part is, if you're accused of an offense, or you've got a charge sheet in front of you right now, you're headed towards trial, this is what the government's going to bring. It's not going to be a fair fight. This system is designed to get a conviction. They always say a trial is a search for the truth. That's not actually correct. It is a system that's designed to get a conviction. And the government's going to pay experts as much as they can and bring in these individuals and use junk science to try to convict you. So you've got to do whatever you can to level the playing field. And if you have an attorney who doesn't recognize the issues, doesn't know how to cross-examine these experts, who doesn't know how to, or is scared of these experts, you're going to lose. And you're going to go to jail or going to go to prison. You're going to be a sex offender. And the government's not going to care. They're going to move on, and that prosecutor, that trial counsel is going to move on to his next case. That doctor's or that psych is going to move on to his next paycheck, and you're going to move on to prison. And so you have to be able to stand up and fight this stuff. And you have to make sure your attorney is not scared, is not intimidated, and has the knowledge base to know how to take on these experts and win.
Well, Tim, that's an excellent point. And I think when you go forward and you're dealing with your either ADC, TDS, or Navy lawyer, you need to make sure that the lawyer is well-versed in cross-examining such experts. Otherwise, they're gonna hold a lot of sway with the panel, and you're gonna find yourself in prison as a registered sex offender, wondering what happened, and then you're gonna be calling one of us to do your appeal.